So our goal for this video is to have smoke trails attached to our projectile and following it as it flies throughout the world. And this will make our projectiles look quite a bit cooler. Hey, welcome back. So we have hit particles, but now we'd like a particle system to follow behind the projectile as it flies throughout the world. So let's talk about how we're going to do this. Now for this particle system, we're going to add a component to the projectile class. Now we've already added a variable called hit particles, and its type is uParticleSystemPointer. Now this is not a component. It's simply a uParticleSystem that we use when we call spawnEmitterAtLocation. So spawnEmitterAtLocation does the creation for us dynamically at runtime in the onHit function. But for a smoke trail, we're going to use something called a particle system component. The particle system component is an actual component that we're going to create in the projectile's constructor using createDefaultSubObject. And we're going to attach this to the root component so that it can follow the projectile around. Now the uParticleSystem component has a variable called template. This is something that we set in the blueprint. Remember when we had static mesh components? And in the blueprint, in the details panel, for the static mesh component, there was a variable called static mesh, and that had a dropdown allowing us to set the static mesh for that static mesh component. The particle system component has a similar variable. It's called template, and this will allow us to use a dropdown to set the particle system for this particle system component. So you already have experience creating components. This process is no different. So this will be your challenge. You're going to add a uParticleSystemComponent pointer variable to the projectile class. Make it visible anywhere, so we'll have access to its properties in the blueprint. Create this in the projectile constructor, which means you're going to use createDefaultSubObject, choosing the correct type and including the correct header. I'm going to leave it up to you to search the documentation for the include for the uParticleSystem component type. Once you've created it, attach it to the root component. We've already seen how to attach components to other components. Now go ahead and compile your code and open the blueprint editor, and in the projectile blueprint, select our new particle system component, and in the details panel, set the template using the dropdown. And you're going to choose the P_projectile trail as the particle system for this component. So pause the video and create this particle system component now. Okay, so I'm here in VS Code and I'd like to close out of the classes I'm not using and go into projectile.h, and here is where I'm going to add the particle system component. Now I'm going to forward declare this, and it's going to be uParticleSystem component pointer, and I'm going to call this trail particles, since this will be a smoke trail. Now I'm going to give this a uProperty and make it visible anywhere, as is done with our components typically, and I'm going to give this a category. And I'll add this to the combat category. So we have a uParticleSystem component pointer. It's time to construct this in the constructor. So let's go to projectile.cpp and scroll up to the constructor, and we can add this here. So we're going to say trail particles and use createDefaultSubObject using uParticleSystemComponent. And in the parentheses, I will give it some text and call this smoke trail. Now I'm going to need the include for uParticleSystem component. So I have my documentation. I'm simply going to search for uParticleSystem component and click on uParticleSystem component, scroll down, and here's the include. It's in particles/particlesystemcomponent.h. So I'm going to include that here at the top, just under gameplay statics. So I've created my trail particles. I now need to attach them to the root component. So I'm going to say trail particles using setup attachment, and I'm going to attach this to root component. and now it's attached. So we've created our trail particles, and we've attached them to the root. Let's go ahead and compile this. Now we're back here in the editor. I'm going to open up BP projectile, and here is my trail particles, and it's parented to projectile mesh, which is the root. So I'm going to select trail particles, and here in the details panel, I see the template variable. It's under particles. I can select the dropdown and choose projectile trail. So that will set our projectile trail particle system. And if you were curious what projectile trail looks like, we can go back to Assets, Effects, and double-click Projectile Trail. We took a look at this early on in the section, and we saw that this is what it looks like. So this is the particle system that will be attached to the root component. And as you'll notice, it's designed to keep looping. So it's going to keep playing as long as it exists in the world. So let's go ahead and test this out. I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and as soon as I can, I'm going to shoot some projectiles, and check that out. This looks amazing. Our projectiles now have a smoke trail, and if we go and aggro the enemies here, we'll see that their projectiles have smoke trails as well. Perfect. So in summary, we now have smoke trails, and our projectiles look quite a bit better. Now we still need a few effects, and we're going to take care of those in the videos to come. I'll see you soon.